It had been a few days since Naruto and Azula had moved into the house behind the Hokage monument. Azula had been mostly silent and only talked when it was necessary. He could see that Azula still didn't trust him, and he wanted to change that. He knew that it would take time, and he was willing to wait. Azula, on the other hand, was trying to think straight as she looked around. It had been days since she came to this place, and she had yet to lock away. She stood on guard, not wanting to be ambushed and taken to a prison. The voices were still there and tormented her whenever they could. The one thing that was keeping her from ending it all was Naruto. Whenever he was around her, the voices were silent. He never left her alone whenever possible. He was there when she had her nightly torment. He just climbed into bed with her and held her. She didn't understand the gesture, but it made her feel safe. She understood that a hug was a form of affection. Unfortunately, the way Naruto held her was like anything she had ever felt. Naruto would just hold Azula in his arms and she would feel safe. He was the only thing she felt sure. "He going to leave you like all the others," Ozai's voice stated in her mind with a laugh, "like I left you." Azula ignored her father's voice, but his words hurt her. Everyone who she cared for left her. Her mother, her friends, and her father all left her alone in the end. She looked at Naruto as he cooked breakfast and wondered if he would leave her as well. "He will leave and you will be alone," Ursa stated. "When that happens, you will be nothing." "Please leave me alone," Azula whispered. Ozai just laughed. "Why should we leave a poor little failure like you alone?" he commented. "You need this to see what a huge failure you are." Azula started cry. "Why do you do this?" she asked. "This is for your own good," Ozai stated. "As I said before, a failure such as yourself needs to be told what a big failure you are. Yes, monsters such as yourself should be told what you are." Ursa commented, and soon more tears started to flow down Azula's face. Suddenly a pair of arms wrapped around Azula's petite form. "Don't listen," Naruto said into Azula's ear. "You are not what they say you are." Azula slowly nodded, tears still falling down her face. She turned to face Naruto, a small knowing smile on his face. He lifted one of his hands, caressed her face. "It's okay, let it out." Azula let her tears fall, and Naruto just held her in the same manner he always did. It made Azula feel safe, and she never wanted to leave that safety. Naruto just stroked her hair and held her. He could smell the food burning, but didn't care. Azula was more important than food. Soon the sound of Azula's sobbing lessened, and the pair slowly detangled. Azula tried to say, but she didn't know what to say. Naruto gave her a grin. "I'm glad you're feeling better," he stated. "Now wait here while I try to save breakfast." Azula watched him as he walked quickly back into the kitchen, and the sound of pans and dishes were heard. She heard him curse, and he walked back into towards him with a smile on his face. "So who wants to go out to eat?" he said. Azula just nodded and stood up. Naruto held out his hand and Azula. Azula looked at Naruto for a moment, not knowing what to do. She slowly extended her hand and slowly wrapped her fingers around Naruto's hand. He gave her a soft smile, and they soon headed towards the village. Azula watched as the house disappeared and they walked out onto the top of the Hokage monument. She followed behind Naruto as he led her down the monument. It was in the middle of the day and the village was full of life. She watched as people walked past and she drew closer to Naruto. Ozai's voice rang through her mind. "All these people hate you." Azula tried to ignore his voice and drew even closer to Naruto. Naruto felt Azula squeeze his hand and he squeezed back. Much to Azula's astonishment, the simple squeeze, the feeling of fear left her and Ozai's voice seemed to fade away. They soon reached their destination and Azula saw a sign that read Ichiraku Ramen. "Come on," Naruto said with a smile and pulled her inside. Azula looked around and saw a large counter and a row of chairs. Naruto led her to a chair and helped her sit down. He sat next to her and gave a smile. "Hey guys." Azula watched a young girl with brunette hair, wearing very plain clothes and an apron. She smiled when she saw Naruto. "Hello Naruto, welcome back," she said. "Hi Ayam," Naruto said with a smile. "It's great to be back." Ayam nodded, then noticed Azula. "Who your friend?" she asked. "This is Azula," Naruto replied. "She new to the village, so I decided to bring her to the best place to eat in the entire village." Ayam smiled. "Well, that nice of you," she said and looked towards Azula with a warm smile on her face. Azula was silent as she looked back at Ayam. She didn't know what to say. Back when she was in the cell, she didn't have any choice in what she ate, and when she lived in the palace, her servants always brought her favorite foods. So now she had no idea what to do. So she remained silent. Ayam seemed to notice her distress. "Let's just start you off with a bowl of miso ramen," she said, and Azula nodded. Ayam smiled and turned toward Naruto. "I will get your usual, is that okay Naruto?" "Of course," he said. Ayam nodded and headed inside. Naruto turned toward Azula. "How are you doing?" Azula looked back at Naruto. "I'm fine," she said with a hint of uncertainty in her voice. Naruto heard the uncertainty in her voice and gave her a concerned look. "No you're not," he said, making Azula flinch. He saw the flinch and gave her a soft smile. "Hey, it's okay. I am not going to hurt you." Azula looked at Naruto and was silent for a bit. She didn't know how to reply. She remained silent. Naruto reached over and took her hand. Azula felt this and slowly her fingers closed around Naruto's hand. While this was going on, Ayam had came out with their food. She saw the pair holding hands and a smile spread across her face. She set the food down on the counter. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything," she said, getting Naruto's and Azula's attention. Naruto blushed and Azula looked at her with confusion, their hands still joined. "You're not interrupting anything," Naruto said quickly. Ayam gave Naruto a knowing look. "Sure I wasn't," she said with a smile. "I leave you and your girlfriend to your meals." Naruto and Azula just watched her walk away in silence. Naruto was the first to come to his senses. He was about to shout after Ayam when Azula gave him a small tug. She gave Naruto the same look of confusion she gave Ayam. "What did she mean by girlfriend?" she asked him. Naruto looked at her with a bit of shock on his face, but it soon faded away. "It nothing," he said as he pulled his ramen toward him. "Let's eat." Azula gave him an angered look. "Naruto, what did she mean?" she said, letting a bit of her old fire burn again. "Tell me." Naruto looked at her with even more shock on his face. This was the first time he seen Azula show any emotion except fear and worry. "She was just joking with us," he said as he lifted his chopsticks to start to eat. Azula got even madder. What was she joking about? She asked, a bit of steam rising off her body. Naruto shrank back a bit from the angry girl. "She was saying we are together," he replied. "What do you mean by together?" she asked him, her anger waning a bit. "She means together as a couple," he stated, and Azula nodded in understanding, a bit of a blush on her face. Please inform her that she was mistaken. Naruto watched her and couldn't help but smile. This confused Azula even further. What is it? She asked him with a bit of confusing. It nice to see you act out, he stated and turned to face his ramen. Now eats before it gets cold. Azula looked at Naruto with a bit of annoyance on her face and turned to face her ramen. She looked over the food and slowly looked around, reached for her chopsticks. She slowly took some noodles from the bowl and looked at them. She watched as Naruto pulled up several lines of noodles, blow on them and slurp them up. She slowly copied Naruto and she was presently surprised at how well the food tasted. She ate her food slowly as her formal training kicked in. She turned and looked at Naruto, who ate the food with gusto. He was so different from anyone she had met. He was always so happy and caring. She continued to eat, a small smirk on her face. They finished their meal and Naruto quickly paid for the meal. They headed back into the village and headed toward the Yamanaka residence to see Inoichi for Azula's first session. They walked toward the front of the house, which was the flower shop. They enter the shop and head toward the counter. Azula saw a girl with long blonde hair sitting at the counter. She was about the same age as Naruto and seemed to reading a magazine, a bored look on her face. Hey Ino, Naruto said, getting the girl attention. She turned and looked at Naruto. Hey Naruto, she said with a sultry smile that made Azula frown. How are you? Naruto smiled back, oblivious to Ino's tone. Great, Naruto replied, we are here to see your dad. We? Ino asked and saw Azula standing next to Naruto. Who's she? This is Azula, Naruto replied. She is new to the village and she has an appointment with your dad. Ino nodded as she looked over Azula. She was silent for a few moments as she looked over Azula. A small frown forming on her face. She could be trouble, Ino thought to herself, but I will make Naruto mine. Follow me, Ino said and opened a panel in the counter. Naruto and Azula followed Ino into the back room to the home area. Inoichi was sitting on the couch and saw the group walk in. Welcome to my home Naruto, Azula, he said as he got up. It nice to see your home Inoichi, Naruto said with a smile. Inoichi nodded and looked toward Azula. It is nice to see you again Azula, he said, and Azula nodded. Now Azula, if you would follow me to my office, we will start your session. Naruto, you can wait here till we're done. Naruto nodded, but Azula took a small step back. Naruto noticed this. He turned toward Inoichi. Give us a second. Naruto turned toward Azula. He saw the worry in her eyes. Hey, it's okay. You're not going to be with me, she asked, the fear evident in her voice. I am out here if you need me, Naruto replied, but that didn't reassure Azula. He pulled her into a hug. It will be okay. Azula was silent for a moment. All right, she said, and they broke their hug. She walked toward Inoichi and he led her toward the back office. Naruto watched them leave and couldn't help but worry about Azula, but she needs the help that he couldn't provide. He was able to help with her mindscape up to a certain point, but she needs a professional like Inoichi to help her as well. Naruto sat down on one of the couches and signed. I hope it goes well, he thought to himself. It will be okay, Kyubi replied. Inoichi knows what he's doing. Naruto smiled. Thanks Q, Naruto said as he got comfortable on the couch. He suddenly felt another presence on the couch and saw Ino sitting next to him. She gave him a very sultry smile that made Naruto get a little nervous. "So Naruto," Ino said, scooting closer to her fellow blonde, "how have you been?" "With Azula and Inoichi." Inoichi sat across from Azula, a warm smile on his face. "Welcome Azula, thank you for coming." He said, "These sessions are to help you heal. Since this is your first session, we will take it slow." Azula just nodded, trying to hide her fear. "Now close your eyes and we will begin." Azula closed her eyes and Inoichi began to go through some hand signs. He finished the final hand sign. He put his hand on Azula's head and slowly descended into her mind. Inoichi opened his eyes and found himself standing in a sea of broken glass and land floating about. Azula stood next to him and couldn't help but cringe. Inoichi looked down at Azula. "Shall we be off?" he asked her and held out his hand. Azula hesitated a bit but slowly grasped Inoichi's extended hand. They slowly moved through Azula's mind. Azula looked around and saw the fragments floating all over the place. Suddenly the sound of her father's laughing filled the air. Azula flinched when she heard this and looked around for the voice. "Look who here," Ozai's voice said from all sides, "our little Azula, come to receive her punishment." "No, leave me alone," Azula said slowly, going into herself. Inoichi narrowed his eyes as he looked at Azula. He kneeled down next to her. "Azula, this is your mind, you have control," he said, "fight it." Azula didn't seem to hear him. "Poor failure Azula," Ozai's voice said as his voice got even louder. "You are going to be shown your failure, and when you can't take it anymore, I will end it for you." Inoichi looked at Azula. "Azula, listen to my voice," he said, trying to get Azula out of herself. Azula looked up at Inoichi, her eyes filled with tears. "Make it stop," she pleaded with Inoichi. Inoichi looked directly into Azula's eyes. "You have the power to make it stop," he said to her with conviction. Azula just looked at him with fear. "I can't," she replied as suddenly a wall of fire appeared beside them. Azula turned and saw Ozai and Ursa standing before them. "Well Azula, it's wonderful to see you," Ursa said with sarcasm in her voice. "You've been such a bad girl being away from us for so long." She pulled out a set of knives. "Now come and get your punishment for making me worry." Inoichi frowned. He hoped this wouldn't happen. He looked down at Azula and saw that she was breaking down. "Azula," he called, hoping his words would get through to her. "If you can hear me, think of the place where you feel the safest and focus on that place." A fireball flew over the pair's head and Inoichi turned and saw Ozai and Ursa coming toward them. "This is not good," he said as he watched the pair advanced. He pulled out a kunai and stood in front of Azula, prepared to fight the pair off. Ozai and Ursa charged forward, going in for kill. Suddenly Ursa and Ozai began to fade from view and another view seems to take its place. Inoichi soon found himself and Azula in the middle of a long hall with many pictures of different people who all looked similar. "Where are we?" Inoichi asked Azula as he looked around the hall. "The Hall of the Fire Lords," Azula said, the fear slowly fading from her voice. "I would always come here when I was feeling sad or lonely." She looked over the faces of the previous Fire Lords and seemed at peace. She looked at one of the spaces and found it empty, much to her relief. "Interesting," Inoichi said as he sat down next to Azula. "So tell me when the first time you came here was." Azula sat next to Inoichi in silence. "When I was 4, I was playing with my brother Zuko. We were practicing our firebending. I was always better than Zuko at firebending and we were sparring. I hit him in the hand and gave him a small burn. Mother came over and fussed over Zuko and scolded me. I got mad and ran away so no one would see me cry. I hated that she yelled at me, it was an accident, I didn't mean to. So I ran here and cried till I had no more tears. After that, this is the place where I come and show emotions that I couldn't show others. Inoichi listened with interest. That's good, he said, so why here? What makes this place so special? Azula looked at face of her grandfather Fire Lord Azulin. When I hear I feel as if they are all watching over me, helping me be the best. Comforting me and helping me through everything. That is wonderful, Inoichi said. He got up and smiled at Azula. I think that enough for today. From now on we are going to start our sessions here and move outward, is that okay with you? Azula just nodded. He watched as Azula slowly faded away back into consciousness. He found the door out of the hallway and looked out into Azula's mind. Everywhere else were broken pieces and shattered buildings for as far as he could see. This is going to take a while. He cut off the jutsu and went back to his body. He opened his eyes and saw Azula staring at him. She seemed a bit better and he was glad he could help her. Let's go see what Naruto's doing, shall we? He said, and Azula nodded. They headed out office and saw no one in the room. They headed into the flower shop and saw Naruto watering the flowers. Naruto set the watering can down and turned to face the pair. Hey guys, how are you? Inoichi smiled. Enjoy yourself, he said, and Naruto nodded. Well, we're done for the day, so she all yours, and also do you know where Ino went? Naruto grabbed Azula quickly and ran out of the shop. Sorry, no idea, bye, he called as he sped off. Inoichi watched this and face-palmed. He headed back into his home and found Ino asleep on her bed. Ino woke up shortly after her father left and looked around her room confused. How I get here, she said to herself, then remembered Naruto knocking her out when she tried to get close to him. She smiled to herself. You won this round, Foxy, but you will be mine. Naruto and Azula walked toward the village from a long day of shopping. It had been days since Azula's first session with Inoichi, and she had gotten a little bit of her fire back. She was showing more emotions, but she still needed Naruto's constant care. The pair walked side by side as they entered the busy village market. Azula looked around and saw many open shops and cart vendors trying to sell their wares. She turned and saw a mother with her daughter, buying some fruit at one of the carts. The little girl had a large smile on her face as she played with her doll. Her mother was talking to the fruit vendor, but always seemed to be able to know when her daughter was about to leave the cart, even without looking at her. Azula looked away, in despair, and turned to look at Naruto. He didn't seem to be his usual happy self. He seemed to be looking around the market with a sense of longing in his eyes. Naruto noticed that Azula was looking at him and gave her a small smile. He didn't want to show her that anything was wrong. He sometimes hated visiting the market. He watched the families interact and it made him green with envy. He watched a father buy his son some candy, and the smile the son gave his father when he got the treat. Is something wrong? He asked Azula, trying to hide his longing. She stared into his eyes. You look sad, she stated, simply. I'm fine, Naruto stated with his masked smile. There's nothing wrong. Azula frowned. You're lying, she replied, a hint of anger in her voice. I don't like liars. Naruto looked at Azula, quite surprised that she saw right through him. He pulled her toward an alley. Was I that obvious? He asked her, as he let his loneliness show on his face. Azula shook her head. It's not obvious, she stated, softly. I have the same eyes as well. Naruto looked down at Azula, her eyes full of sadness and longing. He sat down on the ground and motioned for Azula to sit next to him. Azula looked at him for a few moments, then joined him on the ground. He pulled her close and stared out into the bustling market. I grew up an orphan, Naruto started, looking toward Azula. The sadness of the memories spread across his face. I was hated by the village for something I had no control over. On the day I was born, the village was attacked by a giant fox, known as the Kyubi no Yoko. The fourth Hokage, my father, went to fight the beast and try to stop it from destroying the village. The only way to stop the beast was to seal the beast away in a newborn. I was that newborn. Both my parents died during the sealing, and I was left alone. Naruto stopped for a moment as he remembered his childhood, the glares, the beatings, and always being alone. I spent most of my childhood alone. The market was especially bad. I watched families, happy together, while I sat alone. Even though a lot has changed since then, coming to the market and seeing the families still hurts. Azula looked at Naruto as he finished speaking. The years of loneliness were painfully evident on his face. Even for one so young, she could see the outlines of tears shed against his skin. She looked at the man before her and couldn't think of what to do. She had never seen someone show their weakness openly. It was unsettling for her to say the least. Never in her life did she have to be the comforter, rather than the comforted. Before she could think any more, Naruto had already stood up and gave her a sincere smile. Let's go, he said, his voice seemingly lighter. We have some shopping to do. He offered Azula his hand, and after a moment of hesitation, she took his hand. Naruto slowly helped her to her feet. Azula was not ready for the sudden pull and tripped over her feet, causing her to fall into Naruto's chest. The pair looked into each other's eyes, faces inches away. Naruto blushed slightly at having Azula so close. He could feel her body pressed against his, and it made him feel hot. He looked into Azula's bright amber eyes and couldn't help but feel drawn to her. Azula looked up at Naruto and was equally drawn into him. He was so different from any man she had met. While her father was cold, calculating, and unloving, Naruto was kind, caring, and full of compassion. She didn't understand what she felt when she was near him. He made her feel safe, as well as making her heart beat faster and make her body feel hot. The pair just stood there, Naruto holding Azula in his arms. Naruto was lost in Azula's eyes and Azula, in Naruto's arms. Their faces were inching toward each other. Suddenly a loud crash interrupted the pair. They quickly broke apart, each trying to hide their reddened faces. Azula hid hers better than Naruto. Naruto gave Azula a small smile. Let's go, he said again and held out his hand. Azula took it and the pair joined the market crowd. As soon as they left the alley, they made their way through the crowd to a large shop at the edge of the market. Azula stood next to Naruto as they made their way through the crowd. The great numbers of people frightened her, and she moved closer to Naruto. Suddenly Azula was knocked away from Naruto, her hand slipping from her protector. She looked around and couldn't find him in the crowd. She slowly turned, hopelessly lost in the crowd. Naruto, she called out but to no avail. Everyone just walked past her, minding their own business. She called out his name again, but no answer came. As she continued to call out, she noticed that many people stared at her with annoyance in their eyes. "See, they hate you," Ozai's voice said to Azula as she continued her search. Be quiet," Azula said to Ozai as she looked around. "He left you," Ozai stated with a laugh. "He is never coming back." "You're wrong," Azula shouted. "You're wrong." Ozai laughed. "He left you here amongst your enemies," Ozai shouted. Azula looked around scared, when suddenly someone touched her shoulder, causing her to turn around. She saw a man with pineapple-shaped hair. "Hey, you okay?" he asked Azula, a bored expression on his face. Azula looked at him for a moment before bolting. She looked around and saw people pointing at her. "See, everyone hates you," Ozai stated as a panicked Azula looked around. "That man was there to kill you." It seemed that everyone was watching her run, Ozai's voice ringing through her mind. With Naruto. Naruto felt Azula's hand leave his and he quickly turned. He tried to find Azula, but she was lost in the crowd. "Damn," Naruto said to himself as he looked around for Azula. He quickly jumped to the roofs. Unfortunately, he could not find her. He quickly searched the crowd by creating 20 shadow clones. Unfortunately, they were unable to find her either. "Where can she be?" Naruto said to himself as he hopped from rooftop to rooftop. His eyes quickly scanned the crowd for the lost girl, but to no avail. Suddenly he saw Shikamaru heading toward him, an annoyed look on his face. Naruto waved over to Shikamaru. "Hey," he shouted, waving his arms frantically. Shikamaru looked at Naruto with his patented bothersome look. "Troublemaking blonde," Shikamaru grumbled. "What do you need, Naruto?" "I need your help finding someone," Naruto stated, the urgency evident in his voice. Shikamaru sighed. "Who are you looking for?" he asked. "Her name is Azula," Naruto stated. "She's new to the village and we got separated at the market. She a little smaller than I, black hair and amber eyes." "Have you seen her?" Shikamaru nodded. "Yeah, I ran into her a few minutes ago," he stated. "She was freaking out and I tried to help. Unfortunately, she ran off." Naruto nodded, a frown spread across her face. "Do you know which direction she headed in?" Shikamaru nodded. "Yeah, she headed toward the memorial stone," he replied. Naruto took off running in that direction. Shikamaru watched the dust trail Naruto left, troublemaking blonde. With Azula. Azula stopped running and found herself in an open field with a few trees. Little children ran past her, while their parents watched from afar. She looked around desperate to find a place to hide from the hatred. "They will find you," Ozai's voice stated with satisfaction. "There is no place to hide for a monster like yourself." Azula ignored her father's voice and quickly moved through the park. She turned a corner and saw more people. She stopped in her tracks and quickly went another way. "Run, run as fast as you can," Ursa's voice echoed in her mind. "If you don't, they'll catch you." Azula tried to ignore the voices, but they filled her mind. Ursa was calling her a monster and Ozai was telling her that everyone hated her. She ran into the trees and found a shaded area away from everyone. It was a small clearing with 5 trees surrounding it. She sat there alone, her knees pulled up against her chest. They will find you, Ursa sang in her mind. They will find you, and end you. Suddenly, Inoichi's voice entered her mind. When you're in trouble and can't fight, go to your safe place, Inoichi reminded her. Azula closed her eyes and pictured the Hall of Fire Lords, with its towering columns and the stern faces of her ancestors. Her parents' voices faded as she felt protected by her grandfather. She slowly opened her eyes and looked around her small area of trees. She had stopped the voices on her own. She alone had made them stop. She felt a sense of pride as she felt a bit of control return to her. Suddenly Azula heard her name being called. She listened as the sound of Naruto's voice filled the void. He was looking for her. Azula slowly got up and headed toward the tree-line. She looked out and saw Naruto standing near a strange-looking black stone. He frantically looked around for her, panic evident on his face. She saw the fear in his eyes. She didn't understand what was wrong. She slowly walked out. I'm over here, she called, and Naruto turned toward the sound. He looked her in the eyes and the fear in his eyes slowly drained away. He rushed over to her and pulled her into a tight hug. He held her tight, much to Azula's delight. He loosened the hug a bit and looked into her eyes. I'm so glad you're okay. Azula just nodded. I am fine, she replied, but Naruto knew she was lying. You were not okay, he said with sadness. I lost you and you were alone. I am supposed to always be here for you. Azula slowly nodded. It's true. I was frightened, at first, she said as she leaned her head into Naruto's chest. I didn't know where you were and I didn't know where to go. The voices tried to break me and I ran. I ran aimlessly till I found a place to hide. She pulled herself closer to Naruto. Even though I was alone, for the first time, I was able to make the voices stop, all on my own. Naruto looked down at Azula and saw the fire in her eyes grow. He saw that she was becoming herself again. He didn't say anything, contented to holding her close. A few days later. It had been 3 days since Naruto and Azula were separated at the market, and the pair headed out to the village once again. Naruto had Azula learn a few places in the village, so if they ever get separated again, Azula would have a meeting place to wait for Naruto. They were currently headed to the Yamanaka residence for Azula's session with Inoichi. After the session, they headed to the hospital to get a checkup. Azula. The pair walked side by side through the village as the morning sun splashed across their path. Soon, Yamanaka's flower shop came into view with Inoichi standing outside, waiting for the pair. He waved them over and they headed inside. Naruto stopped in the living room while Inoichi and Azula headed into Inoichi's office. Naruto sat down on the couch inside. He closed his eyes and went to talk to Kyubi. With Azula. Azula and Inoichi sat in the office. An unsettling silence settled in between them. Azula was still worried that something would go wrong and she would never be rid of the voices. Even though she was worried, she felt that she could successfully make them go away. Inoichi looked over Azula, noting every little behavior. She had changed a bit from their last visit. She was not as fidgety as she once was. Her body language showed that she was a bit more confident in herself, but the fear was still evident. The biggest change he noticed was her eyes. They seemed to have a small fire burning in them. Inoichi smiled. "How have you been, Azula?" he asked her. Azula looked up at him. "I am doing better," she replied, a slight confidence in her voice. Inoichi nodded, writing a few things down. "That is good," he replied. "What brought this about?" Azula was silent for a moment. "I was able to stop the voices on my own," Azula stated. "I did as you said, and went to my safe place. Once there, the voices were gone." Inoichi nodded. "That is great," he stated. "Now, are you ready to continue what we worked on last session?" Azula nodded. "Lie down for me," he said as he started the jutsu. In Azula's mind. Azula and Inoichi found themselves standing in the Hall of Fire Lords. The pictures of every Fire Lord were watching over them. Azula seemed to be at peace in the hall. Inoichi walked around the hall and headed toward the entrance. Azula watched him for a moment, not wanting to leave the safety of hall, but soon followed after. They headed out of the hall and saw the broken landscape, but Inoichi was surprised to see some of the floating pieces had gone back into place. The area around the hall was slowly coming together. He was able to make out a garden area as well as some half-rebuilt buildings. The pair walked around and soon found a small pond that was half missing. Azula looked over the pond. "This was where I played with Mai and Tai Li," Azula said as she looked over the pond. "We would come here after school and play near the pond." Inoichi nodded. "Who are Mai and Tai Li?" he asked as he sat down against a tree. "They were my friends," Azula stated with sadness. "I met them when I went to the Royal Fire Academy for girls. We became fast friends. Mai was very quiet and didn't show much emotion, while Tai Li was a bubbly girl who wore her heart on her sleeve." Inoichi watched as the scenery changed and the pair were suddenly standing on top of a building that resembled a prison. Inoichi and Azula watched as Mai stopped the tram systems, letting the people on board the gondola get away. He watched as Mai told Azula that she loved Azula's brother more than she feared Azula. As the pair was about to fight, the brown-hair girl stopped Azula by doing some weird martial art. "They betrayed me. Mai chose my brother over me. I was going to put an end to Mai for her betrayal, but Tai Li stopped me." The pair soon found themselves back at the half-pond. Azula sat at the edge looking out onto it. Inoichi walked over and sat down next to her. "That must have really hurt," he said as he sat next to Azula. "One's friends are very important and betrayal is hard, especially when it's from such good friends." Azula was momentarily silent. "Why did they betray me?" tears slowly falling down her face. Inoichi pulled into a hug. "It could have been many things," he said in a fatherly voice. Azula continued to cry, so Inoichi held her close. He couldn't help but want to protect her. As a father, he hated seeing a girl so broken. He stroked her hair and held her like he would hold Ino when she was sad. "Let it out," he said as he rocked Azula back and forth. The pair sat by the lake, the cries of Azula filling the air. After a few minutes, Azula ran out of tears. She looked up at Inoichi and he gave her a smile. She couldn't understand the warmth he gave out. It was a different version than Naruto's, but it was still a warmth she desired. Inoichi helped Azula to her feet, giving her a fatherly smile. Let's go, he stated. Can you tell me what made you happy? Azula looked up and Inoichi and nodded. I was happy firebending. Firebending? Inoichi asked, curiously. Azula let a small smile show on her face. Yes, firebending, she said as another memory came into play. It showed Azula when she was about 7 years old, practicing a strange kata. While she was doing the kata, she shot fire from her fist. She moved gracefully around the training field, the fire dancing around her. I love firebending, Azula cheered. I always loved practicing my bending. It was the only time I felt that I could let loose. Inoichi nodded. You can still do it. There is no one stopping you. Azula frowned. I can't firebend anymore, she replied. It stopped when I lost to my brother and the waterbending girl. Lost your bending? Inoichi stated with a look of confusion. How is that possible? Firebending is fueled by our emotions, Azula stated. I can't seem to create the fire anymore. Inoichi looked at Azula and saw the sadness on her face. He could see the love of firebending in Azula's eyes. Suddenly a shadow flew over the pair. Inoichi quickly hid Azula behind him with fatherly protection. The pair looked up and saw 2 large dragons flying overhead. Holy crap! Inoichi cried as he stood in front of Azula. The dragons slowly landed in front of the pair. There was a red dragon and a blue dragon. The red dragon leaned down and pushed its snout against Inoichi. Move 4-in-1, the dragon rumbled. We have to talk with the fire girl. Inoichi didn't move. I won't let you hurt her, he stated while the blue dragon started laughing. The blue dragon leaned down its head. You are a funny 4-in-1, it said with a large smile, its sharp teeth gleaming. We do not want to hurt the fire girl, we wish to talk with her. Azula slowly walked out from behind Inoichi. What do you want with me? She asked, trying not to look scared. The red dragon spun around Azula, blocking her from Inoichi. Inoichi quickly tried to restrain Azula, but the dragon was too big. Now, young fire girl. Do you wish to be free? The red dragon asked, its eyes burning down onto Azula. Free? Azula asked with confused. Yes, fire girl, free, the blue dragon stated as it poked its head down toward Azula. Free to live happy from your past. Azula gave a puzzled look at the dragon. Free? She stated the word seeming foreign in her mouth. How? The red dragon lowered its head. When you are ready, you will find us at the end, it stated. Before Azula could ask another question, the dragon quickly unwrapped itself from Azula and flew off. The blue dragon followed close behind. Inoichi ran toward Azula and looked her over. Are you okay? He asked. Azula looked at Inoichi and nodded. The dragon's words echoed in her mind. In the Avatar world, Aang and everyone had gathered everything they needed to head to the new world. They headed toward the North Pole to meet you and start their journey to get Azula back. Aang stood on the bow of a Fire Navy ship and looked out into the night air. He was determined to bring Azula back here where she couldn't harm anyone. Everyone else was asleep as he looked out into the night sky. Suddenly, the stars began to move and his former selves Avatar Roku and Avatar Kyoshi appear in front of him. Roku, Kyoshi, it's so good to see you, he said with a large smile. but the seriousness on the other avatars' faces quickly made him frown. What's wrong? Avatar Roku looked at Aang with sadness in his eyes. Aang, the journey you are about to undertake is one that should not be taken, he said, much to Aang's surprise. Why is that? Azula is a monster. She has hurt too many people and needs to be locked up. Koishir looked at Aang, sadness adorning her face. For a monk, you are quite closed-minded, she stated. Azula is a lost soul who was sent somewhere to become whole. How do you know this? Aang asked, surprised by this revelation. We agreed it was a good idea to send her there, Roku explained as Aang looked on, his eyes wide as the moon. What? He shouted, how did this happen? Kami made it so, Roku replied simply. Who is Kami? Aang asked. You would know her as the Great Spirit, Kyoshi stated. Wait, the Great Spirit is a girl. Aang shouted and Kyoshi shook her head. Men, she sighed and disappeared into the air. Roku looked over at Aang. Aang, all I ask of you is to look at Azula as you would a lost soul, Roku stated. She has had a hard life. Aang looked at his previous self. I will try, he stated with a slight frown. Roku nodded. That is all I ask, he said and disappeared into the night. Inoichi slowly entered his own mind, after his encounter with the dragons in Azula's mind. He looked over at the now waking girl and gave her a sad smile. From what he had seen so far, he wanted to go find her parents, as well as anyone else who had hurt her, and destroy each of their minds, slowly, very slowly. Inoichi stood up and walked over toward Azula. She watched him closely, still a bit wary of him. He sat down next to her, a concerned smile still evident on his face. Without saying a word, he pulled her close to him and held her. This confused Azula at first. He wasn't saying anything, but she could feel something from him. It felt warm, as well as protective. She wanted to understand what his intentions were and why she suddenly felt so safe. Inoichi slowly broke the embrace and looked down at Azula. Feel better? He asked her, warmly. Azula just nodded. She did feel better, better than she had ever felt in a long time. Inoichi knelt down in front of Azula. Now, Azula, I want you to do some things for me, okay, he stated, in a fatherly voice. Azula nodded. I want you to practice your firebending katas. Azula stared at him with confusion. I can't firebend, she mumbled, sadly. The kata are useless without firebending. Inoichi just chuckled a bit. Trust me, he replied with a wink. They will still come in handy. Azula looked at Inoichi, unsure about the usefulness of the katas, but agreed anyway. Inoichi helped Azula to her feet and they headed out of the office. They found Naruto, passed out on Inoichi's couch. Azula looked over Naruto's sleeping form. He seemed so serene when he was sleeping, not a care in the world. She hoped, one day, she would again sleep like that. Inoichi looked down at Naruto and sighed. He tapped Naruto, waking him up. Naruto slowly sat up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. So, you're done, he noted with a yawn. Naruto got up and smiled at Azula. Inoichi gave Naruto a stern look. Now, Naruto, there is something I want you to do to help Azula recover, he stated. Naruto looked directly into Inoichi's eyes, his full attention directed toward the older blonde. What is it, Inoichi? He asked. Take Azula to one of the training grounds and work out with her, he said with a smile. Naruto nodded and gave a quick salute. Yes, sir, he said with a huge grin. Naruto turned toward Azula and offered her his hand. Shall we head out? Azula nodded, and the pair soon left Inoichi's home. Inoichi left soon after, toward the Hokage Tower. He passed by some of his fellow shinobi and smiled. He entered the tower headed to the Hokage office. He found Tsunade at her desk, working on paperwork, a frown on her face. Tsunade soon noticed Inoichi. Inoichi, how have you been? She asked warmly, setting down her pen. I am doing well, Hokage-sama, he replied, just working mostly. Tsunade nodded. I thank you for that. She opened one of the desk drawers, pulled out 2 small glasses, and a bottle of sake. Would you like a drink? Inoichi looked at Tsunade with surprise on his face. I would love one, actually, he replied, and Tsunade poured his drink. Tsunade lifted her glass. To Konoha, she toasted and drank it down quickly. To Konoha, Inoichi agreed and emptied his glass. He set the cup down and took a seat next to the desk. So, how's the family? Tsunade asked as she poured herself a refill. They are doing well, Inoichi replied, taking some sake for himself. Ino has been doing a lot of missions lately and Mina is doing well. Business at the shop has been good. Tsunade smiled. That's good, she replied, after downing her second glass. It is, he stated, finishing his sake. I would like to talk with you about Azula. Tsunade set down her cup. What is it? She asked, pushing her cup away. Inoichi was silent for a moment. She's doing better since she's been with Naruto. He has been taking care of her, he said, hesitating, but there is a lot of work left to do. There is more than that, isn't there? Tsunade questioned as she looked over Inoichi. He sat there, the sadness and anger in his body language. Her own family treated her like a monster, Inoichi cried, his temper beginning to show. Her own friends betrayed her. She was always alone. As a parent, I can't believe someone would treat their child like that. If I ever treated Ino like that, I would rather kill myself. Just watching her break down, seeing her own parents try to destroy her in her own mind, I just want to hurt them. Tsunade watched the man as his rage filled him. She had to admit, a father's anger was truly one of a kind. She bet if Inoichi ever met the people who hurt Azula, they would wish that they had never been born. She handed him another full glass. Drink, she ordered, as he stared at her bewildered. It will help you calm down. Inoichi nodded and took a drink. The best thing you can do is to be there for Azula, like a father should. Inoichi nodded and filled his cup again, a small smile on his face. I'll drink to that. Tsunade nodded and the pair continued to drain the bottle in silence. SB. Azula slowly opened her eyes as the sun came in. It had been several days since her last session with Inoichi. She had been thinking over what Inoichi had told her about Ty Lee's and Mai's betrayal a lot. As she looked over their entire relationship, she saw that she wasn't the best friend to the girls. She had been very controlling and vindictive towards the pair. Azula frowned as she pondered over all of her memories of the time they had spent together. What had she done wrong? Why had this happened? This line of mental questioning frustrated her to no end. She slowly sat up and looked to see Naruto still asleep beside her. He always slept with her ever since they had moved into this place. At first he would just come in and hold her whenever she had a nightmare. Due to the frequency of her nightmares, they had decided that Azula would sleep in Naruto's room until she felt comfortable enough to sleep by herself. She watched Naruto sleep, a calm look on his face. Azula looked at her caretaker and couldn't help but smile. Azula slowly lifted her hand and brushed it across Naruto's cheek, against the whisker-like marks. She noted that Naruto would purr as she moved her fingers gently across them. Azula continued to rub Naruto's cheek and his purring got louder the more she rubbed. Suddenly, Naruto rolled over onto Azula, pinning her to the bed. Azula tried to move but Naruto was too heavy, and she had yet to regain her strength. She stopped struggling and felt Naruto's breath against her neck. A blush slowly grew on Azula's face as she felt Naruto's hot breath against her skin. She couldn't understand why her body was suddenly heating up. This heat was different than anything she had felt before. When she was firebending, her body would heat up, but it was an angry heat, a heat of destruction. Now, the heat she was feeling was so different. It wasn't like the burning heat of anger and hatred she was used to. It was a very light heat. It made her feel warm inside, but in a good way. It felt so comforting and light, not heavy and angry. Azula desperately racked her mind as to the meaning and origin of this pleasant, new sensation. As she ran various ideas through her head, she felt Naruto slowly waking up. He slowly stretched his arms and rose above Azula with a loud yawn. He blinked his eyes a few times and saw Azula below him. Naruto stared at Azula for a few moments wondering if he was dreaming. Naruto looked and saw that Azula had a large blush on her face. Her shirt had bunched up showing her stomach and a hint of her bra. Naruto's eyes grew wide and he quickly jumped off the bed. "I'm sorry," Naruto cried as he waited for Azula to hit him and accuse him of being a pervert. After a few moments had passed and he hadn't received a punch of divine justice, Naruto hesitantly glanced at Azula and saw a confused look on her face. Naruto looked at Azula, unsure of what to do. Why wasn't she attacking him? He would expect that if this had happened with any other girl, they would have beat the living daylights out of him. "Why are you on the floor?" Azula asked him, curious. "Well," Naruto stammered, "I was on top of you, and I saw something I shouldn't have." Azula stared at him. "That doesn't explain why you are on the floor," she replied, awaiting his response. Naruto chuckled nervously and slowly got up. "I was surprised, that's all," he replied as he walked toward the door. "Why were you surprised?" Azula asked, tilting her head slightly. Naruto looked at the girl before her, the way her pajamas hugged her form and the way her hair fell around her face. "I was just surprised," Naruto stated as he quickly got up, the redness spreading across his cheeks. "I'll see you in the kitchen." Azula watched as Naruto dashed out of the room, still confused about what had just happened. She felt him look over her entire form before he left, and his face had turned red the longer he looked at her. What was that all about? Azula thought to herself as she got out of bed and prepared for the day. Azula soon exited the room and joined Naruto in the kitchen. She watched as he moved around the kitchen with practiced ease. She also noted that there were 2 other Naruto clones working with the real Naruto. When she first witnessed this talent of his, it freaked her out. It took her a bit, but she was finally getting used to it. She sat down at the table and continued to watch as the Narutos cooked. One of the Narutos turned and looked over at Azula. "Almost done," he promised, sweetly. Azula just nodded as she stretched. Soon the sound of her name filled her mind. She ignored it and focused on Naruto. The voice grew louder and louder. Azula slowly led her mind to the safety of the halls of the Fire Lords. The voice faded away and Azula let out a quick sigh of relief. She had been getting better at blocking out the voices the more time she spent with Naruto. Azula was pulled out of her mind at the sound of a plate being put in front of her. She looked up and saw Naruto standing beside her, smiling. "Someone seems to be in a good mood," he stated, as he set down his own food and sat down next to Azula. Azula nodded. "Just quieting the problems," she stated as she started to eat. The pair ate quickly and Naruto conjured up a few clones to clean up the mess. Naruto stood up and stretched. "Now, let's get going," he said with excitement. "Where are we going?" Azula asked, a bit surprised. She thought that the day was going to be spent at home. "Training," Naruto said with glee, and headed out the back door. "You need to get back into shape. We can't have the princess in anything but her top form." Azula let a small smirk grace her face. "That's obvious," she stated, a hint of excitement and fear in her voice. "As a princess of the Fire Nation, I must be prepared for battle at all times." Naruto smiled. "That's the spirit," he cheered. "Now, more training and less sitting." Azula just shook her head at Naruto's antics and soon joined him in the backyard. It was a spacious area, perfect for training. "We're going to start off with some light exercise," Naruto said with a smile as he motioned for Azula to join him. "Let's start with some push-ups, 30, exact." In Avatar World. The royal airship had stopped at Kyoshi Island for a much-needed resupply. Everyone had exited the ship and was mingling with the local townspeople. One person stood away from the rest. Mai watched from the sidelines as everyone talked and laughed without her. She sighed and walked away. She walked around Kyoshi village, looking for a familiar bubbly girl. It had been such a long time since she last saw Tai Li. Mai walked around the village with her usual, unreadable expression on her face. When she had first heard that Azula had escaped, she didn't know what to think. Because of the fact that she didn't know in what state of mind Azula was in, she was a bit scared. The last time she saw Azula was when she visited her in her cell. Azula didn't even notice Mai when she had visited. She was too far gone in her mind to notice anyone else. Now Azula was missing, and a great many things could go wrong. Mai sighed as she walked toward the middle of the village. She wanted to find Tai Li and get her opinion on Azula's disappearance. It was always good to get the bubbly girl's differing point of view on any situation. Mai soon found herself standing in front of the statue of Avatar Kyoshi. It had been restored to its full glory. Mai just looked over the statue trying to glean information as to what the Avatar would do in this situation. "Mai," a voice shouted and tackled Mai to the ground. Mai noted her friend, Tai Li, hugging her tightly. "Get off, Tai Li," Mai huffed. Tai Li giggled. "Sorry," she replied, a large smile on her face. It's just that it's been such a long time since I've seen you. I missed you so much. Mai sighed and patted Ty Lee on the head. I missed you as well, she said. Now, gets off. Ty Lee quickly released her grip, her signature smile on her face. Mai just stood up and sighed. Ty Lee, I need to tell you something. Do you have somewhere private where we can talk? Ty Lee nodded and walked toward the Kyoshi Warrior Training Center. Mai followed quickly and made sure that they were alone in the training area. So, what would you like to talk about? Ty Lee asked as she walked on her hands. Mai sat down and looked soberly at Ty Lee. Azula has vanished, she whispered. Ty Lee fell over in shock. Azula? Missing? Ty Lee asked as she sat down. What happened? Mai explained the full story, as Ty Lee listened eagerly. Mai watched as her friend processed the information, trying to figure out what she was thinking. Actually, this was the longest she had seen Ty Lee sit still in a long time. Ty Lee suddenly jumped up, a determined look on her face. All right, she shouted. Let's go get Azula. Mai looked at Ty Lee, tilting her head to one side. Are you sure? She asked. It might not end well. Ty Lee just smiled. She's our friend, she replied, biting her lip. I want her to be safe and happy. She was so broken after what happened. Even though she was mean a lot of the time, Azula was my friend and I will protect her, even from herself. Mai looked at Ty Lee. I agree, she replied. Azula was a witch at times, but she was always there for us. Now it is time for us to be there for her. Ty Lee smiled and pulled Mai into a hug. Yeah. Ty Lee shouted. Mai just tried to breathe, a nearly unnoticeable smile on her face. With Azula. Azula lay on the ground, exhausted. It had been several days since she began to exercise with Naruto, and she had to admit it was tiring. She learned quickly that Naruto loved to train and would spend hours doing it, if he could. His workouts were insane, in her opinion. He would do 3 sets of 300 push-ups, 200 sit-ups, 500 crunches, 500 punches on each arm, and 500 kicks with each leg. He had made a similar type of workout for Azula, but at a fraction of the number of each exercise. She had to do 2 sets of 30 push-ups, 20 sit-ups, 40 crunches, 100 punches per arm, and 100 kicks per leg. Azula was always physically drained after this exercise, but somehow, she always felt better at the end. When she trained alongside Naruto, it didn't feel like work to her, it was just enjoyment. Did she dare to admit it was fun? Azula slowly sat up when suddenly she felt something cold against her cheek. Here, Naruto offered, holding a cold bottle of water to her face. Azula took the bottle and slowly drank the cold liquid. The feeling of the cool water entering her body was refreshing. She looked up and saw Naruto standing next to her, his own water bottle in hand. He smiled at her and took a quick drink. Have fun? Naruto asked, grinning. Azula just nodded. Yeah, she replied, slowly rising. It's nice to do this, it helps to clear my mind. Naruto agreed. Training always makes me feel better. Naruto looked up and smiled. It was still early in the day and he had no plans. He looked toward Azula and saw that she was still resting from training. He could tell she wanted to continue, but he wanted to build her muscles up a bit more before moving on to taijutsu training. He was about to head inside when an ANBU appeared in the field. "Uzumaki, the Hokage wants to see you in her office right away," the ANBU announced. Naruto nodded, then looked toward Azula. "But, what about the princess?" he asked, worried about leaving her alone. "The Hokage has already taken care of that," the ANBU said. "Narasama should be here shortly." Naruto looked at the ANBU, wondering why they were sending Shikamaru's dad to look after Azula. He would rather just send a clone to Tsunade and stay with Azula himself. "Hello, anyone home?" a female voice called from the front of the house. Naruto created a clone and had it go to the front of the house to greet the newcomer. Soon they were joined by a woman with long brown hair, kept in a ponytail with two tails that framed her face. She wore a pink blouse with a brown skirt. This was Yoshino Nara, mother of Shikamaru. From what Naruto had heard from Shikamaru, she was a troublesome woman, very strict and overbearing. Based on Naruto's interactions with her, she seemed like a pleasant enough woman. "Hello, Nara-san," Naruto said, bowing slightly. "Thank you for looking after Azula for me." Yoshino smiled. Such a nice young man, she thought. "Please, call me Yoshino." "Okay, Yoshino," Naruto replied, smiling. He waved Azula over, with a hand. "I would like you to meet Princess Azula." Azula looked at the woman before her, with suspicion. She didn't want Naruto to leave. "Hello," she said quickly and hid behind Naruto. Yoshino smiled at Azula. "It's nice to meet you," she replied. "I hope we can get along." The interaction between Azula and Yoshino made Naruto worry. Azula didn't seem to like Yoshino, she seemed to be very suspicious of her. Naruto led Azula aside, a concerned look on his face. "What is wrong?" he asked her. "Do you have to go?" Azula asked, nervous. "Can't you just stay?" Naruto looked at Azula. "I wish I could, but Bachan sent an ANBU to come get me." "It must be something important," he replied. Fear was still quite apparent on her face. "You will be okay. Yoshino will be here. She's a great person." Azula nodded, yet unconvinced. Naruto noticed this and pulled her into a hug. "Hey, it will be okay. I will be back soon." Azula didn't move as Naruto held her. She didn't know what to believe. This would be the first time that Naruto would be away from her. This scared her deeply. What if he didn't come back? How would she be able to stop the voices? Suddenly she felt Naruto kissed her forehead. Azula was startled at first, but soon relaxed. "I will be back," Naruto whispered. Naruto led Azula over to Yoshino. "Keep her safe," Naruto said to Yoshino, a worried undertone in his voice. Yoshino nodded. "You can count on me," she replied. "Now go. Don't keep the Hokage waiting." Naruto looked at Azula once more and gave her a smile before leaving the house and a nervous Azula behind. Azula watched as Naruto disappeared from the house and quickly headed inside, wanting nothing more than to find something to distract her mind. She was afraid that the voices would come back, and now she didn't have Naruto to help her. Azula was about to disappear into her and Naruto's room when she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to Yoshino. Azula, where are you headed? Yoshino asked, concerned. I am just tired, Azula replied. I was going to take a nap. Yoshino nodded and Azula disappeared into her room. She quickly lay down on the bed and closed her eyes, hoping the voices would leave her be. She slept peacefully for a few hours, when suddenly she was pulled into her mind. She found herself standing in her old room in the Fire Nation Palace. The room looked pitiful and unfit to live in. Azula turned and walked toward the door, wanting to leave. She pulled at the handle, but the door wouldn't budge. She began to panic as she tried, unsuccessfully, to leave the room. Let me out, she cried as she pulled at the door. Suddenly she heard a voice from the other side. I'm sorry, Azula, but I cannot let you out, said Ursa. This is your home. It's perfect for you. Azula pulled at the door. Let me out, she screamed again. Ursa just tapped the door once. Sorry, I cannot, a monster needs to be locked away, she said. And this is perfect for you. So, enjoy your new life. Azula heard her mother walk away, leaving her locked in the room. Azula banged at the door with all her might, even attempting to break down the door, but nothing worked. She was trapped with no way out. She sat down with her back to the door. Someone help me, Azula cried, as tears started to fall down her face. Help me. Suddenly Azula opened her eyes and found herself being held by someone. She was back in her room and Yoshino was holding her close. Azula was surprised by this but was so relieved at being out of the locked room and away from her mother that her tears began to flow uncontrollable as she lay in Yoshino's arms.